Aliens Explored is a podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it? In 1923, following a romantic disappointment, Latvian immigrant Edward Leedskalnin started building a huge rock garden in Florida. He would carry on building this structure for the best part of the next 30 years, at one point even transporting his creation 10 miles away to a new site when plans for a new subdivision emerged in his neighbourhood. But how did a diminutive man who stood only 5 feet tall in his socks move and manipulate over 1,000 tons of fossilised coral on his own? Was it true, as he claimed, that he had discovered the secret of the pyramids, or was he helped by some otherworldly technology? Join us on Aliens Explored as we delve into the mystery of the Coral Castle.
Hello listeners and welcome to another episode of Aliens Explored, your weekly look at this strange, mysterious UFOs, UAPs, aliens, weird things going on. I mean, we're definitely getting weird this week. I am one of your hosts, Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly.
How's it going, Neil? It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has for us, not for our listeners, of course, but...
It's been a whole week for the listeners.
Oh, yeah, it's been a whole week. A week can be a very long time. I've heard it's a long time in politics.
It is. It is indeed. Politics, probably not a subject we want to get onto, otherwise we'll spend the next half an hour ranting and raving. Oh, yes.
Don't get me started. Once you get into those conspiracies, you know.
Oh, yes, I know. Right, get vaccinated, folks. That's all I'm going to say. I've been on Twitter, and that's not a good place to be. The amount of personal abuse I got for suggesting that I thought sort of vaccine passports might be a good idea, because not so much, removing people's... I believe people should have the freedom as to whether or not they get vaccinated, but I also think if you're going to choose not to get vaccinated, then I think it's only reasonable that you're not in a place where you're crammed in with lots of other people.
Well, and also there's a lot of misinformation about. I mean, there was an uproar in this country about vaccination passports being required for people to go into nightclubs, and that's been debunked by the government's chief scientist, who said, well, people who are of sort of nightclub going age haven't even been offered the vaccine yet, so they haven't had an opportunity to refuse it. So get vaccinated, because the only way we're going to get back to normal, when this pandemic has either left us or we've learned to live with it, it will either be when everyone is either vaccinated or dead. So that's the choice: either choose the vaccine or choose death. There's an awful lot of people dying after having refused the vaccine. I have people in my own family who have refused the vaccine, and I've made plans for their funerals.
Well, that's it. But I mean, going onto Twitter and suggesting that I personally think it's not a bad idea, these vaccines, but oh my God, the personal abuse and attacks that I got. It was, I had people basically, expressing wishes of death on me. I had people, an awful lot of comments about my weight. I mean, all right, in some cases, people may choose not to do anything about their weight, but listeners, I have 2 medical conditions that actually prevent me from losing. In order for me not to gain weight, I have to have a deficit of 2,000 calories a day. I mean, that's going some. I also can't exercise too much, because if I exercise too much, I've got a condition called ME, then I'm laid up in bed for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, but just
That's
as a
screwed.
general point, if you're debating something with someone and they start in with the personal attacks, it's because they don't have a valid argument
Oh,
and they
yes.
know it. And
Yeah.
they know it.
Oh, ad hominem means they've lost the argument.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
But yeah, that said, they were a bunch of twats. So
Yeah. So best stay away from that. You know, you're banging your head against the
I
wall, I
did
think.
set foot into Twitter, though.
If government doctors and scientists, if doctors and scientists can't persuade them to take a vaccine, which hasn't just suddenly been magicked up in the last few months, you know, they've been working on SARS-CoV vaccine since these things started appearing. We had bird flu, we had the H4N1. All they had to do was adjust it to be to the right flavour for COVID-19.
Yes.
So it's not a sudden miracle cure that they've produced. It's an awful lot of work has gone into this over a very long time.
Yeah, about 40 years worth of work. Yeah, I know. Oh, but it's an experimental death virus. As someone say, it's like it's just like injecting yourself with Ebola in the hopes that it'll cure HIV. I mean, that's as puerile an example as it gets.
Now, I understand why in America, in the United States, there is a tradition for going for quack cures rather than going to see a doctor, because they have private medical insurance over in the United States, which means that millions of people cannot see a doctor, cannot have professional medical care without becoming destitute. So they go for the quack cures. I don't understand why that has spread over to Britain, over to Europe, where we have comprehensive, free at the point of use insurance. But even in America, the vaccine's being offered for free. I know they have this tradition. So, but people are talking about, they're saying, I don't want to put this strange stuff in my body. I don't trust you. They're putting all sorts of other things in their body. People have been hospitalised for drinking disinfectant at the former president's suggestion.
Horseworm is the latest thing, isn't it?
Ivermectin, the horseworm. They're happy to swallow that because some right wing shock jock on whatever radio station exhorts them to, but they're not prepared to follow a doctor's advice.
I know.
So you're not gonna get very far by arguing with them, Stu. That's what I'm saying.
No, that's very true. Very true. I get much further arguing with you, I find.
Do you?
Well, that's what this whole podcast is.
I suppose it is, yeah. So you'll put up your theory about visitations from another world, and I'll make a comment about your weight.
Excuse me. No, I was going to pull your theory about alien visitation, but anyway, no, that's how we are a little bit closer to home, although there is a purported strong UFO connection with today's subject. It's much closer to home, much more terrestrial today, isn't it, Neil?
Well, it is, but often in talking about UFOs or UAPs, we talk about artifacts that they've perhaps left behind, starting with the Roswell crash, for one, things they didn't mean to leave behind. But yes, so this is something which has some sort of, which has a mystery behind it.
I can hear the sigh in your voice as you say that, Neil. So, for the benefit of our listeners, we are talking today about the Coral Castle. And you asked me last week, Neil, where is the Coral Castle? And I could only answer, it's in America.
I looked it up. Yeah, I looked it up.
As did I. And it's actually on the South Dixie Highway in Miami, Florida. Yes. So it's a place that people can visit. It's been around for an awful long time.
Well, it was built in the 1920s, wasn't it, by a Latvian immigrant named Edward Leedskalnin.
Yeah, well, it was started in 1923. Took him till 1951 to complete. And he did it on its own. It's an entire sort of compound, buildings. It's a castle.
Well, it's a rock garden more than a castle, isn't it? I mean, it's a very, very big rock garden.
It is. I feel the term rock garden. Now, my picture of a rock garden is like a group of boulders at the bottom of, like, a small patch of grass. This is massive. I mean, tons and tons and tons. I forget how many. Here we go. 1,100 tons of coral rock
that he shifted on his own over a 30-odd year period.
Yeah. Now, this is a guy barely over 5 foot tall, weighing about 100 pounds. Did it without large machinery, without equipment that we're aware of. And this is where the mystery comes into it, is how he moved and manipulated these massive, massive blocks of rock. I mean, the walls alone. So he started construction of this thing, and he had to move it about 10 miles. And people can recall seeing it being moved along, being dragged along by his French truck. These blocks that were used to make the surrounding walls. Now, each of these were, I have to get this right, 8 foot tall by 4 foot wide and 3 foot thick. So each block weighed 5.8 tons on its own, and they moved these one at a time. But nobody knows, like they remember seeing it on the road, but nobody knows how he loaded it or unloaded it or got them upright or anything like that, because he did it on his own.
Well, we do have the involvement of friends and trucks, so
only to get it from point A to point B, not to get it onto the it was basically a trailer made out of a railway cart. So not to get it onto that, and not to get it off on the other end. That's weird.
It's strange, but I'm not a builder. I'm not an engineer, so I find most buildings quite fascinating. Anyway, when I stop to think, oh, I wonder how they did that.
Well, builders, engineers and scientists have looked at this ever since its construction, and nobody's really come up with an answer as to how he did it.
Because he won't say, because he would say, well, I harnessed the secrets of the pyramids or something like that.
Well, he certainly wouldn't say now because he's passed away. But yeah, now you're giving his quote there, wasn't it? Yeah, that he knew the secrets of how the Egyptians built the pyramids. And he said, and if you knew, you'd find it easy as well.
That suggests to me that he used slaves. Which was illegal in the United States by the 1920s.
It was.
And had been illegal for quite some time.
Well, I think we would have witnesses to that if that were the case. I mean, he certainly wasn't a rich person by any stretch of the imagination. When he died, I think they found 35 $100 bills. That was his life savings. Because the way he made his money was basically by charging entrance into this coral castle at like 10 cents a person.
Well, there's the original. I think it's carved into rock. There's an original little sign there saying admission 10 cents. Drop below. Drop it into a hole. And apparently he only started charging that when visitors turned up and started being rude and disrespecting the place. They thought, sod it, I'll charge them. I think it costs an awful lot more to get in now. It's more about $18 a head or something, isn't it?
It's undoubtedly more now, but inflation, I can accept that. I think he also sold pamphlets as well. He had 3 pamphlets in particular. One called Sweet 16, which was about the woman that he built it in testament, because it's quite a sad story. This he was 26 when he he was 26 years old. He was engaged to be married to a girl called Agnes, who was 16 years old at the time, but she dumped him a day before the wedding. And it was some 7 years later, he'd come over to America by this point. He got TB as well. I mean, this is like, again, this just adds to how staggering it is that he managed to build this thing. But he came over, he got TB, but 7 years later he started building this coral castle as a testament to Agnes, who he called his Sweet 16.
So he had a romantic disappointment,
He did.
which many of us have had in our lives, and of course, you and I, when those spring chickens,
Oh yeah,
we've had romantic disappointments. We've been unlucky in love at times. But I haven't. Usually, my reaction hasn't been to build a vast monument in her name, in memory of the woman who dumped me. And apparently, this was originally, he just called it Ed's Place, didn't he? Well, if you're not going to marry me, I'm going to build a massive shrine to you.
The first name I'd come across was Rockgate Park.
Okay.
I've not heard about Ed's Place, but quite possibly. I can certainly see that. Yeah, so that was one of his pamphlets, was Sweet 16. There was another pamphlet on domestic and political views, because we all like to express our political views, don't we, Neil?
Certainly when we have a captive audience.
But the third pamphlet, and this is what I find quite interesting. The domestic and political views was the Sweet 16 one. He wrote another pamphlet on magnetic current, which I think is, could that have been some sort of clue or testament to how he built the coral castle, was looking at magnetic currents. And his third one was mineral, vegetable, and animal life, containing his belief on life cycles. You can still get them to this day, apparently in the gift shop. But yeah, so magnetic current. That I find quite interesting, because after he died, they found the remains of an AC current generator that he had built himself. No other tools, no other sort of mechanisms or anything like that.
That we know of.
That they've found. No, that's right. So yeah, it's really interesting. The only other thing he said, other than the secrets of the pyramids, was that he understood the laws of weight and leverage well. Now we all understand it's the Archimedes principle, isn't it, with the lever?
You wouldn't want to go and visit a rock garden with towering piles of coral rock or fossilised coral weighing tons if it had been built by someone who didn't understand basic basic physics.
Well, no, although he only had a 4th grade education. He wasn't, a classically well-educated person in that regard.
But then... No, all right. I was going to say no. I won't say it.
Well, no. I mean, it could be self-educated, and I get that. But how can someone in the 20s, with a relatively low level of intelligence, do something that baffles engineers and scientists to this day?
Well, not intelligence, but education. What he learned in school, and how much he learned in school. I think all of us, and probably most of our listeners, know an awful lot of stuff we weren't taught in school. We know it because we're interested in it.
That's very true.
You learn a foreign language because you end up in a foreign country, and you need to survive.
Well, yes, but very few people who do not have the benefit of the education as well as the intelligence come up with things that are unfathomable to this day. That's the key thing for me. It's not so much, I mean, if you come up with something that, actually it took us a team of 10 engineers to figure out, and this man did it on his own, that'd be like, well, that's just really impressive. Yes. But this is something different. This is, to this day, they don't know how he did it. 100 years later, nearly.
Okay, so he built this, looks very impressive rock garden, Coral Castle, as it came to be known by people around, and then the name stuck. But where's the extraterrestrial connection?
Well, it has been theorized that what he actually had was either a device or knowledge imparted from extraterrestrials that basically gave him anti-gravity, either abilities or access
Which
to.
come in handy for shifting huge lumps of rock.
It would be an easy explanation for it, that's for sure. And also, if it was the same technology or system or whatever you might want to call it that that was imparted to the ancient Egyptians to build the pyramids, because obviously there is a huge connection there where people believe that that ancient aliens taught the Egyptians how to make pyramids and how to move those great big stones and get them to such massive heights.
Well, not just the Egyptians, but peoples in Central and South America as well, the Aztecs, the Incas, and whatever. But that you're in danger of straying into a racist explanation there, because you're in danger of saying, well, white people didn't build this, so it must have been aliens. We don't believe that the indigenous peoples of these countries were capable of developing such a civilization. It's a dangerous area to tread into, I think.
I've heard this put forward before by debunkers, and do you know what? I'd like to address it from my own perspective here. Saying, wow, it's incredible, look at the pyramids, look at how high they got those stones. It's amazing. We'd struggle to do that today with stuff. We're not saying, oh, it's because they're Egyptian. It's not saying, oh, it's because they're Mexican. And do you know what? We say the exact same thing about Stonehenge today. So there's that aspect. But we're not talking about it because of their... We're talking about it because of what point in history it was. And it doesn't matter if it was Egypt or Mexico or Britain or Spain or anywhere, or it could have been the Australian Aboriginals. It doesn't matter who it was. It's about when it happened and the level of technology that was available. Not about people's intelligence, just the level of technology that was available. And that's what defies belief. That's what makes it hard to understand.
But the history is full of people who have come up with something, and it's in many cases taken hundreds of years to work out how they did it.
Yes.
A classic was Fermat's last theorem, a mathematical theorem that he said, well, if you add two squared numbers together, or the square root of two squared numbers will sometimes be a whole number. So 3 squared plus 4 squared is 9 plus 16 equals 25. So the square root of that is 5. You get a whole number. 4 squared plus 5 squared is 16 plus 25, which is 41, which doesn't, which you get a decimal point. But what Fermat said was, whatever the number n, whatever your the multiplier, or the whatever your, if it's 2 to the power 2, if it's 2 to the plus 2 to the power 3, or 3 to the power 2 plus 4 to the power 2, that's squared. But he said that will never work with cubes. You will never get a whole number with cubes. And in fact, if the what you're squaring it or cubing it or whatever the power to which you're multiplying that number is, if it's more than 2, then no matter what that number is, and no matter what number it's powered by, if it's added to another, you will never, ever, ever be able to get a whole number.
Okay.
And it's been proven that he was right. But it was only in the early 21st century, well, possibly the end of the 20th century, that was proven using supercomputers. Because how do they know that there isn't a number somewhere out there in the billions or trillions where actually, if you apply this power of maybe billions and trillions, that you will actually come back to a whole number. That what they can't work out is, how did he know? How did he ever know?
Is it possible that he took a bit of a punt?
It's possible, but I mean,
happened to be right.
It was never accepted as mathematical laws they have an even higher burden of proof than scientific laws. Scientific laws are regularly amended or disproven, but mathematical laws can't. I mean, our cities would collapse if the basic mathematics on which they were founded was found to be unsound, or there was somehow an exception to the rule somewhere. So it wasn't accepted. And it was only late 20th century, early 21st century where people said, actually, yeah, this is right. This is actually, we can actually accept that as a mathematical law. But he was in either the 16th century, I think it was 16th century.
Yeah.
And he just created mathematical puzzles as a hobby.
Yeah.
He and his friends would exchange them and try and work out what
we've digressed quite a bit away. So to come back on the like I say, it's not a question of me questioning the intelligence of the ancient Egyptians or the Aztecs or of anyone. It's not about intelligence. It is purely about, it requires physical tools and equipment to do these things. So, I mean, taking Stonehenge as an example, these great big multi-ton blocks of stone were moved something like 300 miles. Now, first of all, I mean, why?
Yeah.
How did they know where it was? How did they know where it needed to be? And how did they move it? And nobody has any answers for that to this day. Now, it might be that there's a perfectly simple, rational explanation out there waiting to be discovered. And it may be exactly the same with how they built the pyramids. It may be exactly the same with the Coral Castle. And I like to keep an open mind to that. But I also think until we know what the answer is, let's explore different. I mean, that's name of the show, Aliens Explored.
Yeah,
let's explore the potential. Let's explore the
potential, because, if you say, how did we do this? There are mysteries in our ancient past, thousands of years old, and there are mysteries in our more recent past. Stuff we just don't know how they did it. And I suppose, you have various options that you can explore, and one of them could be extraterrestrials. Now, there's a particular thing with the Coral Castle, is that there is a carving in the rock of what looks like an alien grey. And he's put a couple of little, I think there's yellow stones in for eyes. Was this a tribute to the alien who came along and helped him? Or was it just that, like a sculptor will tell you, when you ask them, how did you get the idea to turn this massive lump of rock into this figure of whatever it is, of a chicken or a naked woman? And the sculptor would usually say, well, I just saw the form in the rocks. All I did was chip away all the bits that don't belong to the chicken.
All the unwanted parts,
all the unwanted parts. And what's left is the vision that I saw. And it could be that he just saw something in the rock and thought, oh, yeah, I can just sort of shave away a couple of little bits. And you've got a funny little face there. which, of course, in later years, people said, oh, that looks like our idea of an extraterrestrial visitor.
It's also there's a particular name for it, and I can never remember the name, but there's a thing about us seeing faces in things that aren't necessarily meant to be faces.
Because our brains are designed to seek out patterns.
Yes,
that's where conspiracy theories come from. You can't just say, well, this is unrelated, this happened and then this happened. No, there's got to be a connection somewhere. That's why they saw
the fact that some conspiracies do happen.
Conspiracies do happen. We're undoubtedly on the receiving end of a few of them right as we speak. But there was the face on Mars,
yes,
which was seen in 1976. When they got a bit closer and able to look at it with better optics, they could see how the illusion was created, but it wasn't a face. And we tend to do that. I have this thing. I often, it's not quite hallucinating, but I do see shapes round about dusk as the light's drawing in, and because in daylight your eyes perceive objects mainly through their colour, and then that you use different cells in your eyes when it gets dark to discern things more by shape. Well, it's in that sort of crossover period as one of them is, one set of cells is winding down and one set of cells is just firing up, that I start to imagine I've seen odd things. Okay. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who sees ghosts like that.
It's that
and witches in the trees.
That and your tea time LSD.
That and my tea time LSD. Yeah, that's
okay. Well, let's kind of wind up our thoughts on Coral Castle then. So the usual question, and I'm going to open this up beyond the whole extraterrestrial thing. Neil, do you think that Coral Castle was created with the use of otherworldly intervention?
Although I would have to say, well, that's I can't rule that out as a possibility. Like anyone else, I don't know how this guy built the coral castle. I don't know how he transported such large chunks of fossilised coral to build this thing. So I don't know. So I'm going to say I'm not going to rule out some sort of magic or some sort of extra otherworldly intervention, but I don't think that's the likely source. I think it's an amazing thing he's done. We should be amazed by it. I would like to go there and be amazed by it. It's on my bucket list now. But for now, I'm just going to say, well, no, I'll keep the extraterrestrial explanation in the back pocket.
That's good to hear it saying, but because am I right in thinking you hadn't heard of it before?
I hadn't.
We said we were going to talk about it,
and I've been to Florida, but I went, more than 20 years ago with my girlfriend and my 13-year-old daughter. So it was more about going to theme parks than anything else. Right.
I mean, it existed then, obviously.
It existed, yeah. But and of course we were just in Orlando, so we didn't really,
Okay. Oh, you saw the mouse.
Yes.
Chasing the mouse.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just one of these things. When I go to a foreign country, I tend not to range too far because you risk missing all sorts of things that are close to home. If you go to a strange city you've never been to before, why do you want to book a day trip to another city that you haven't got enough time to see this one city that you're in? So
very true. Very true.
Follow me for more top travel tips.
That's a new podcast coming from Figure Films. Well, for my for what it's worth, from my point of view, I do think I find his cryptic comments about the knowledge of the pharaohs and leverage. I find that interesting. I find it evasive and interesting. I think finding parts of this AC generator that he built himself really strange. I find the fact that he's put a pamphlet out about magnetic current really interesting. And to me, these have all got to be connected. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if this is knowledge that has come from an otherworldly source, ultimately.
I would be surprised. I think...
Yeah, I
think there's a difference between us is the extent to which we'd be surprised.
I think if ever we do find what caused it, I think we're going to end up with a bit of a smoking gun. That's my thoughts. But what do you think, listeners? Had you ever heard of the Coral Castle before? If not, what do you think of it now? I mean, if you had heard of it before, what do you think of it now? Is it indeed some sort of otherworldly inspired creation, or is it just very down to earth, very terrestrial, and just Edward was a bit of a genius, unappreciated in his time? Do message in and let us know. You can let us know via the usual means. We're on Twitter, getting political sometimes. We're on Facebook, and of course you can email us aliensexplored@gmail.com. And while you're at it, don't forget to leave us a quick review wherever you listen to your podcast, because that really does help a lot of podcasts like ours to find new listeners and for new listeners to find us. So it's always very appreciated. Now, Neil, next week, do you know what? I mean, you and I were both professional actors.
Mm-hmm.
we're going to be interviewing another professional actor.
a rather more successful actor, professional actor than ourselves.
Oh, don't say that. I've worked with the guy. But no,
and look at him now. Look how far he's come from those dark days.
He's overcome that disadvantage of having worked with me. Is this what you're saying? Yeah. Oh, dear me. So this was the last episode of Aliens Explode. No, I'm kidding. But yes, next week we have the star of the Discovery Plus documentary, Roswell, The Final Verdict, coming in to talk to us about his role. He recreated one of the senior people involved in the Roswell mystery for the documentary. So he'll be coming in to talk to us about that. That is Marcus Churchill. I can't wait to grill him about all of that. Very exciting.
Politely ask him.
No, I know him. I can grill him.
Really?
No. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a really good chat. Really looking forward to it. So you don't want to miss that one, listeners. So, in the meantime, keep watching out for all sorts of otherworldly technologies or maybe ways of doing things that nobody's thought of yet. And, of course, the skulls. Take care for now.
Yeah, catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Aliens Explored is a Figo Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored or visit aliensexplored.com.